how often do you really think about compromise? I mean, really think about it. Is it just, giving in, that feeling like you're grudgingly conceding just to stop an argument?
Right.
Or could it actually be something, I don't know, deeper, maybe woven into the very fabric of who we are?
Yeah, I think that's closer to it.
Because, it feels like a daily thing, negotiating dinner plans, what to watch. But the sources suggest there's this surprising, really intricate science behind it all.
It's true. And that's exactly what we're diving into today. We're looking at the science of human compromising on a personal preference, but through this really interesting analytical lens of an AI-driven interdisciplinary analysis.
Okay.
And our mission really is to unpack why compromise isn't just some convenient social tool. It's fundamental. It's this multi-layered thing that's absolutely essential for, individual well-being, for society sticking together, and maybe even for planetary sustainability.
Wow. Okay, that's a huge claim. Essential for sustainability. I'm definitely intrigued. So what can you expect from this deep dive then?
Well, we're going to try and move beyond the surface level stuff.
Right.
You'll hopefully see how compromise is deeply rooted in our biology, in our brains, how it's shaped profoundly by psychology, by culture, and even how you see echoes of it in nature itself. And crucially, you'll see how an AI's perspective, its analytical power, helps connect all these dots that might seem pretty separate otherwise.
Into one big picture. Okay, sounds good. So let's start with the basics. We need to get clear on what we're actually talking about. What is a personal preference in this context?
Yeah, good starting point.
Yeah.
Because to get compromise, you first need to understand preference. And it's not like a fixed choice you make once and that's it forever.
Yeah.
Think of it more like a dynamic idea, something your brain is actively building, rebuilding, refining all the time. It's basically an output of your memory and your inference system.
So it learns. It adapts.
Exactly. It's constantly being updated by new experiences, new information coming in.
So definitely not static. It evolves. That's a really different way of thinking about it. Does that mean it's sort of a mix of, nature and nurture, or is it more tangled than that? And where do emotions fit in? Do they lock preferences in?
It's absolutely a blend.
Yeah.
Yeah, your preferences get shaped by both your sort of inherent leanings and the environment you're in, and emotional impact. Huge.
Right.
For instance, the sources talk about how someone's preference for, say, being frugal with leisure activities might come from really positive past experiences they had just enjoying themselves at home.
Oh, okay.
That good feeling, that positive memory, it reduces the motivation to spend money going out.
I can totally relate to that. The cozy night in becomes the go-to option.
Exactly. Or, on the flip side, maybe travel exposes you to all sorts of amazing experiences, and that fosters a preference for, higher quality activities because you've seen what's out there.
Makes sense.
Now, when we talk about compromise itself in this context, we're defining it as a collaborative process.
Why?
Often strategic, too.
Okay.
It involves people or groups making concessions, giving a little ground, to reach an agreement everyone can basically live with.
Yeah.
Finding that middle ground.
And that middle ground, it doesn't have to be permanent, right? It could be like a temporary fix, a provisional arrangement.
Precisely. Or it could be more definitive, breaking a social deadlock. Think about a church revising its core beliefs, or how government policies get hammered out.
Yeah, I imagine the sort of anxiety that your side might just get overridden. That probably fuels a lot of intense discussion, making compromise almost a default mode in politics.
Very much so. And what's really insightful here, getting back to the AI, is how it looks at this. An AI doesn't just see isolated events. It crunches vast amounts of data to find patterns, predict likely outcomes, maybe even identify the best paths to get to a desired societal state.
So it sees the bigger picture across time.
Exactly. This multi-temporal analysis, looking at dynamics across past, present, and future.
Yeah.
It lets the AI grasp the full life cycle and the knock-on effects of compromise in ways that, frankly, we might just miss.
That's fascinating. Okay, so let's get into the brain's role then. How do these preferences actually form and shift inside our heads? The sources talk about this really sophisticated 4-step neural thing, especially for those really hard decisions where you're genuinely torn between options. Tell us about that.
Right. So first step, value computation. You've got these areas in your prefrontal cortex, the VMPFC, DLPFC, VSTR. Think of them as your brain's valuation committee.
Okay.
They're busy calculating the potential value, the payoff of each option you're considering, trying to find the winner.
But what happens in those hard decisions you mentioned where there isn't a clear winner, when things feel really balanced?
Oh, that's where step 2 comes in, conflict detection. There's a part of your brain called the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, the DACC. It basically acts like an internal alarm bell for indecision.
Right.
It lights up. And this is key. The research suggests preference changes only really happen in these harder, more conflicted decisions, which makes sense. They take longer to figure out.
Okay, so the conflict signals something needs to shift.
Exactly. Which leads to step 3, value updating. Your brain doesn't just sit there stuck. It actively starts constructing new preference values even before you've made the choice.
Wow.
And get this, even where you look, how long your eyes linger on one option versus another seems to play a causal role. It helps predict what you'll choose and how its perceived value changes. The DLPFC and another area, the precuneus, are involved here.
So the brain is literally building a stronger preference on the fly just to make the decision easier. That's incredibly dynamic.
It really is.
Yeah.
And then finally, step 4, a value-based decision is made. That rapid fixation-guided calculation creates enough of a difference in perceived value to tip the scales. It turns a hard decision into an easier one. And for these changes to actually stick, to become part of your long-term memory, activity in the left hippocampus is important.
Okay.
So the big takeaway is that preferences aren't fixed points. They're actively adjusted by the brain. It's an adaptive mechanism, really, to stop us getting completely gridlocked in complex situations.
It sounds like our brains are fundamentally wired to avoid getting stuck. Does that innate drive to find a way forward, maybe through compromise, also have a genetic component? Are some of us just biologically more inclined to compromise?
That's a great question. And it seems like it. It's definitely this complex dance, right? Between your genes, your environment, how your mind works, your emotions. But genetics gives you an initial nudge, a predisposition. Research points to maybe up to 50% of personality being heritable. And that includes traits like agreeableness.
Agreeableness. So that's people who are generally considerate, friendly, helpful, and willing to compromise.
Exactly. That's the profile. And the sources mention specific genetic variants that seem correlated with agreeableness. Things like variants in the DRD3 gene, which is active in the brain's limbic system, think emotions and motivation, and also the CLOCK gene, linked to our daily rhythms.
So what's the big implication here?
Well, the profound implication is, if personality traits that influence compromise have a significant genetic basis, then there's a biological component to how inclined you are to compromise.
Right.
It suggests some individuals might just be inherently more likely or less likely to seek compromise simply because of their genetic makeup, which is fascinating because down the line, maybe this understanding could help tailor conflict resolution strategies to be more effective for different people.
So it's not just about learning to compromise, it's partly baked into our biology. But okay, environment and culture must still play a massive role, surely. How do they shape our preferences?
Oh, absolutely. Hugely powerful. Your environment is like this constant teacher. Culture provides the big framework, right? Tells you what's good, what's desirable food, aesthetics, social norms.
But you just absorb that by living in it.
Pretty much, yeah. You internalize those societal values through immersion.
And what about the more immediate environment, family, friends, colleagues?
Super crucial. They're like direct pipelines for preference transmission. You learn by watching them, imitating them, sometimes through direct instruction. Like the classic example, growing up in a family that loves spicy food makes it way more likely you'll develop a taste for it too.
Yeah, definitely seen that happen.
And then there are things the sources call lifestyle strategies and phenotypic plasticity.
Okay, what are those?
Basically our biological flexibility, our ability to tweak our traits in response to what the environment throws at us. Their behavioral adjustment to stress or opportunity, rooted in our genetic potential, but definitely shaped by our culture and experiences.
This whole idea of adaptation brings us to a really interesting point about the evolution of compromise. We tend to think of evolution as this march towards perfection, right? Optimal designs everywhere.
Yeah, that's the common misconception.
But the sources push back on that. They say evolution is more about good enough solutions for survival. Not perfect, just workable. Our bodies are apparently a patchwork of adaptive features.
They really are. I mean, think about the human spine.
Okay.
It's adapted for walking upright, which is great, but it came from ancestors who walked on all fours. So it's prone to problems, back pain.
Yeah.
It wasn't designed from scratch for bipedalism.
Right. It's a modification.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or think about human childbirth. It's incredibly complex, even risky compared to many other mammals. That's partly the evolutionary cost of having these big brains. These are trade-offs, imperfections that worked well enough to allow us to survive and reproduce, but they aren't optimal in every single way.
Okay, so if our own bodies, our cognitive systems, are inherently compromised in their design, they're good enough, but not perfect for every scenario. Does that somehow mean we're almost hardwired to seek good enough solutions in our behavior to, like, compromise?
That's precisely the aha moment the sources point towards.
Yeah.
Yes. If our internal systems embody these trade-offs, these imperfections, it naturally creates internal conflicts and conflicts with the external world. So behavioral compromise isn't just some polite social strategy we learned. It becomes this crucial adaptive strategy for navigating a reality that is itself imperfect and full of trade-offs.
Wow.
It reframes compromise, doesn't it? From just a social tool to something fundamental, evolutionarily ingrained. A coping mechanism. It helps explain why we need it. Because our very existence is built on evolutionary compromises, and our preferences often clash, requiring constant negotiation, internally and externally, just to function and survive.
That is a huge shift in perspective. It's not just about getting along nicely. It's fundamental to how we navigate the world as these imperfectly optimized beings. Okay, let's dive into the psychology of it then, the psychology of concession, these internal and external battles. First off, what exactly is intrapersonal compromise, the internal kind?
Right. So this is the negotiation you do inside your own head. It's that reflexive decision-making when you're facing conflicting beliefs, values, or principles within yourself. It often involves, as the sources put it, sacrificing something that is of principled concern to yourself, maybe to align with what others expect, or just to resolve your own internal inconsistencies.
That sounds hard, like arguing with yourself.
It can be. And there are strategies people use, consciously or not, like questioning your own unconscious beliefs, trying to manage the emotions tied up in the conflict, engaging in a kind of self-dialogue to weigh things up.
Okay, so how do pressures from the outside world connect to this internal struggle? Does one trigger the other?
Very often, yes.
Yeah.
Think about Linda Gottfried's theory on career choice. It's called circumscription and compromise.
Okay.
The idea is that young people first rule out careers they see as unacceptable for themselves, maybe based on social class or gender roles or perceived ability. That's circumscription. Then they compromise. They start sacrificing the jobs they find most intrinsically appealing for ones that seem more accessible, more realistic given external barriers.
Like lack of information or not having the right connections.
Exactly.
Yeah.
External factors. So the critical link is this. External realities force you to adjust your ideal preferences. And that often sparks an internal conflict between your deeply held values, your principled concerns, and the practicalities of the situation.
Ah, I see. So compromise is fundamentally about negotiating with yourself in response to the world around you.
Precisely. And this ties directly into cognitive dissonance.
Right, that uncomfortable feeling.
Yeah, that psychological discomfort you get when you hold contradictory beliefs or when your actions don't line up with what you think is right.
We all know that feeling.
Absolutely. And we're motivated to reduce it. So we might adjust our beliefs or seek a compromise that lessens the conflict, or sometimes we just rationalize our actions to make ourselves feel better.
So dissonance can actually push us towards compromise.
It can, yes,
Mm.
as an adaptive way to resolve the tension. But, and this is crucial, it can also lead to the rejection of compromise. Someone might double down, become more rigid, engage in self-deception, just to avoid admitting the inconsistency. Understanding that dynamic is really key if you want to help people compromise. Maybe framing compromise as a sign of strength, of adaptability rather than weakness, could help tip the balance.
Making it the path of least internal resistance, perhaps? Okay, and then there's cognitive flexibility. This sounds like it must be pretty essential for compromise. What exactly is it?
It's basically the ability to mentally juggle multiple perspectives at once, to adapt your mindset, switch gears, and adjust your behavior accordingly.
So not being stuck in one way of thinking.
Exactly. It's vital for healthy relationships, problem solving. It's the opposite of rigidity. Rigidity, that inability to shift perspective, is often linked to things like rumination, getting stuck on negative thoughts, and even some forms of psychopathology.
Right.
So cognitive flexibility isn't just about being willing to change your mind on an issue. It's about being able to pivot your whole approach, your whole way of seeing the problem. You know, like when you're assembling some flat pack furniture.
Oh, don't start.
The instructions are just nonsense.
Yeah.
You realize you have to ditch the instructions and figure out a completely different way to make it work. That's cognitive flexibility in action.
That is a painfully perfect analogy. Okay, this internal landscape is incredibly complex. Let's shift focus a bit outwards now. How does this play out in social interactions and negotiations? The sources talk about a kind of hidden calculus. Tell us about social exchange theory.
Right. So social exchange theory looks at social behavior, including compromise, almost like an economic transaction.
Okay.
The basic idea is that in relationships, we're constantly, often unconsciously, weighing the costs and benefits. We're trying to maximize our rewards and minimize our costs.
Like a personal ledger sheet for each relationship.
Kind of, yeah. And compromise, viewed through this lens, is about adjusting what you contribute or what you expect back to try and achieve a balance that feels fair, equitable. It's about making the relationship profitable for both sides in a broad sense.
So, wait. Does that mean even acts that look selfless, like giving in on something important, might have this underlying economic rationality? Are we calculating even when we think we're being generous?
That's the intriguing nugget from the theory.
Yes.
Even seemingly altruistic concessions are often, perhaps subconsciously, driven by a deeper, long-term calculation of the relationship's overall value. Keeping the relationship healthy and balanced provides future rewards.
That's quite a revelation. But it makes sense. You invest in good relationships.
Exactly. And you can actually leverage this insight if you can clearly show someone the long-term benefits, the relational rewards of making mutual concessions now. That can be a powerful motivator for compromise.
That's a really practical tool. What about the psychology of effective negotiation itself? What are the core principles there?
Well, a key one is focusing on the underlying interests, what people really need or care about, rather than getting stuck on rigid positions, what they say they want.
So digging deeper.
Yes. Also, anticipating cognitive biases, like our tendency to fear losses more than we value gains, and trying to counteract them. And of course, building rapport and trust is fundamental.
And emotional intelligence, EI, does that play a big role?
Hugely beneficial, yes. The sources suggest people with high EI often fall into the compromising type in negotiations. They're good at seeking win-win solutions because they can use empathy to understand the other side's perspective and manage their own emotions, keeping things constructive even when it gets tense.
Okay, so this isn't just about individual psychology then. It scales up, right? Compromises. It feels like a fundamental necessity for society itself.
Oh, absolutely essential. For any kind of collective existence, for progress. I mean, look at the United States. It was literally founded on a series of compromises.
Right.
The Constitution, the structure of government, none of that would have happened without hammering out agreements like the Three-Fifths Compromise, the Missouri Compromise, the Compromise of 1850. Difficult, often morally fraught compromises, but necessary to form the Union.
But there's a catch, isn't there? A paradox. You mentioned the Missouri Compromise. While these deals are essential for immediate stability, they often feel like just kicking the can down the road, like a provisional arrangement rather than a real final settlement. Can you elaborate on that?
Certainly. The Missouri Compromise is a prime example. Yes, it delayed the Civil War for decades, which was a form of stability. But by drawing that line across the country, dividing slave and free states, it arguably sowed the seeds of the eventual conflict. It perfectly illustrates that tension. Compromise is vital for immediate progress, for holding things together, but it often papers over a deeper, underlying, and continuing conflict of values. So the real challenge becomes distinguishing between compromises that genuinely move things forward, promoting overall well-being, and those that just postpone the inevitable reckoning.
That's a really difficult distinction to make in the moment, and culturally. Does everyone approach compromise the same way, or does it vary wildly?
Wildly is probably accurate. Yeah, the approach reflects very different conflict resolution styles around the world. For instance, you often see collectivist cultures prioritizing group harmony. They might favor more indirect negotiation, saving face.
Right.
Whereas individualistic cultures often value assertiveness, direct communication, getting your own needs met more explicitly.
And there are other dimensions, too.
Yeah, like tight versus loose cultures. Tight cultures have strong social norms, low tolerance for deviant behavior, more emphasis on rules. Loose cultures are more flexible, more tolerant of ambiguity. That affects how readily people might compromise on established norms.
So thinking back to the AI, if you were building an AI to help facilitate compromise on a global scale, it would have to be incredibly culturally savvy.
Absolutely essential. It couldn't just impose some universal optimal definition of compromise derived from, say, Western game theory.
Right.
It would need to deeply understand and adapt to all these diverse norms and values, which means feeding it vast amounts of ethnographic data.
Yeah.
cultural frameworks. It's a huge challenge.
And then there's the whole us versus them dynamic. Tribalism.
Yeah.
How does that mess things up for compromise? We see it constantly, it feels like.
It's a massive barrier. Ethnocentrism, thinking your group is superior, and just general tribalistic thinking. It breeds hostility, prejudice, making compromise seem like betrayal.
Yeah.
You see what some sources call the anti-politics of identity, where sticking rigidly to your group's position, refusing to compromise, is framed as a virtue, as resistance, as protecting your identity.
So when someone is absolutely unwilling to budge, it might not just be stubbornness. It could feel like their very identity is on the line.
That's often a huge part of it. The refusal to compromise, especially on issues tied to deeply held beliefs or group identity, can be a powerful defense mechanism against a perceived threat.
That really changes how you might need to approach that situation. Just demanding they compromise probably won't work.
Usually makes it worse. You have to find ways to address those underlying identity concerns, make people feel seen and respected before you can even talk about substantive concessions.
Okay, this naturally leads us into the trickier side of things. The ethical minefields, the power plays. Because compromise isn't always presented as a good thing, is it? People talk about compromising your principles.
Absolutely. It's far from straightforward ethically. There's this ongoing debate. On one side, you have pragmatic arguments. Some agreement, even if flawed, is often better than no agreement at all. Even if there's some moral loss, the practical outcome might justify it.
Okay.
On the other side, you have principled arguments. The compromise itself can have moral value. It expresses respect for different viewpoints. It can remedy democratic deficits by including more voices.
That's a classic objection remains.
The classic objection is that compromise is inherently a foregoing of principle, selling out, especially if you hold to some form of ethical absolutism, where certain moral rules are unbreakable.
The example often used is Neville Chamberlain at Munich, right? His compromise with Hitler.
Exactly. A stark example where a compromise hailed initially as securing peace for our time was later widely seen as a catastrophic moral and strategic failure. It highlights that the ethical calculus is incredibly complex and, as the sources say, temporally complex. You have to evaluate it not just in the moment it's made, but also later when you see the full consequences unfold. It's this constant tension between practical outcomes and fundamental moral principles.
And the science of human compromising, understanding how it works psychologically, that can be exploited, can't it? Especially when there are power imbalances.
Oh, absolutely. Leaders or anyone in a position of power can leverage these insights manipulatively.
How does that work? How can understanding compromise be turned into a tool for manipulation?
Well, if you understand cognitive biases like loss aversion, how people hate losing something more than they like gaining something equivalent.
Right.
You can frame proposals very carefully. You might present a concession you want someone to make, not as them gaining something small, but as them avoiding a big loss if they don't agree. That can be much more persuasive, even coercive.
So, playing on psychological triggers.
Exactly. Or manipulating cognitive dissonance, making people feel uncomfortable about their current stance to nudge them towards your preferred compromise. It underscores why transparency and accountability are so critical in any negotiation.
And this is where AI could potentially play a role, but maybe an ethical one.
Potentially, yes. An ethically designed AI could act as a kind of moral auditor. It could analyze communication patterns, look at the power dynamics between parties, examine the fairness of outcomes over time, basically try to detect patterns suggestive of manipulation or coercion, helping to ensure fairness.
That's a really vital potential role for AI. Okay, so what happens when compromise just fails? When individuals or groups simply refuse to engage, refuse to concede anything, what's the ultimate cost?
Well, the costs ripple outwards. For the individual who refuses, it might lead to, losing personal integrity, feeling guilt or shame later, definitely damaged relationships, maybe even negative mental health impacts from unresolved conflict.
And for society.
That's where the impact is often broadest. It can lead to a breakdown of trust in institutions, trust between groups, a lack of social cohesion, stalled progress on critical issues. Think about politics stuck in a permanent campaigning mindset, where scoring points is more important than governing. That paralyzes things.
Right. Nothing gets done.
Exactly. So the key takeaway here seems to be when individuals or groups dig in their heels and refuse to compromise, the main victim isn't just the other side. It's often the collective good. Society itself becomes stagnant, divided. The ultimate loser is usually broader society.
Wow. Yeah, the collective good suffers.
Precisely. The lack of cohesion, the inability to tackle big problems, it affects everyone.
It's so clear how vital compromise is for us humans. But what about the natural world? Does nature offer any, I don't know, master classes in compromise? Or is that just us projecting?
Well, nature is full of compromise. It just doesn't call it that. But it operates on fundamental rules that are all about balancing competing needs with limited resources.
Like what?
Well, trade-offs are absolutely everywhere. Ecosystems run on finite resources, energy, nutrients, time. So organisms constantly have to make balancing acts. Think about putting energy into growing bigger versus putting energy into reproducing.
Can't do both maximally at the same time.
Exactly. Or a plant allocating resources to grow taller to reach sunlight versus producing chemical defenses to ward off herbivores. It's a constant negotiation with constraints, never all or nothing.
Okay. And what about things like symbiosis, cooperation? Are those forms of natural compromise?
Absolutely. Symbiotic relationships are a perfect example. They're mutually beneficial interactions, sometimes extending, as the sources say, beyond the boundaries of genetic familiarity.
Meaning not just helping your relatives.
Right. Think of the classic clownfish and sea anemone. The fish gets protection, the anemone might get cleaned or defended. Both gain something, likely giving up something minor in return. Even relationships involving parasites can sometimes maintain a balance that benefits the wider ecosystem. Cooperation isn't just a human thing.
And resource allocation, how organisms use their energy.
Also key, how does a single organism or a whole colony like ants or bees use its finite energy budget most effectively for survival and reproduction? It's not random. There are often quite sophisticated organized methods involve deliberate trade-offs.
And the idea of interdependence.
Yes, the fundamental ecological principle that the whole depends upon the individual and vice versa.
Right.
A beautiful example mentioned is how older, established trees in a forest can actually support younger, struggling saplings through underground fungal networks, sharing resources.
Wow.
It's like the forest itself is engaging in a form of collective compromise for long-term health.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can definitely see nature's processes as these dynamic forms of compromise, optimizing for survival and fitness over the long haul within real-world limits. It shifts the perspective, doesn't it? From just human compromise to maybe a broader planetary compromise.
It really does. We're part of a system that's built on these principles. So understanding these ecological ideas, could that help us humans develop better, more sustainable compromises, especially regarding the environment?
That's the hope, and the connection is direct. Achieving environmental sustainability absolutely demands a massive form of human compromise. It requires, as one source puts it, the sacrifice of substantial things today to improve a future, which often seems distant and abstract.
That's intergenerational compromise, isn't it? Trading our immediate desires like high consumption for the well-being of future generations.
Explicitly, yeah. We already see societal compromises in environmental policy. Things like the Clean Air Act involve trade-offs between industry costs and public health benefits. But the scale of challenges like climate change, that demand far more extensive compromises. Transitioning to a circular economy, decarbonizing energy.
Yeah.
These are huge societal shifts requiring broad agreement on shared sacrifices and benefits.
And this is where people often struggle, right? That gap between knowing we should do something for the long term and actually doing it now. Can AI help bridge that intention behavior gap?
That's one of the really exciting potential roles for AI here. It could help make those distant, abstract future consequences feel more tangible, more immediate.
How?
Through advanced modeling, simulations, visualizations. Imagine AI showing you, in a really compelling way, the direct impact of your community's energy choices today on local sea levels or crop yields 50 years from now. By making the future consequences feel more real and personally relevant, AI could potentially help individuals and societies better grasp the value of making those intergenerational compromises now, fostering that pro-environmental action.
That could be genuinely transformative. Okay, let's try and bring all these threads together now, looking through that AI perspective again. How does an AI actually achieve this comprehensive understanding of compromise across all these different layers we've talked about? Biology, psychology, culture, ethics, nature.
Well, it approaches compromise, not as one thing, but as a complex, multi-layered system. All those elements we discussed, genetics, neurocognition, personal experience, social exchange dynamics, cultural norms, ethical considerations, environmental pressures. It sees them as interacting variables.
Okay.
Using advanced analytics, machine learning, it can sift through enormous amounts of data to identify patterns, predict outcomes, quantify the potential costs and benefits of different compromise solutions, and even model the likely long-term stability and fairness of agreements reached under different conditions.
And the sources mentioned an AI-generated multi-layered model of compromise, like a conceptual schematic. Can you walk us through how those layers interact in that model? Give us a feel for it.
Sure. At the very core, you have personal preference, how it forms influence by genetics, environment, memory, emotion, and crucially, how those neurocognitive processes we discussed earlier dynamically adjust it.
Right, the brain making choices easier.
Exactly. Then layered around that, you have the internal dynamics of the individual. This includes those internal conflicts, cognitive dissonance, cognitive biases, emotional intelligence, all the psychological stuff happening inside someone's head.
Okay, so how does what's happening inside affect how we deal with others?
That's the next layer, interpersonal dynamics. This covers the social exchange calculations, the negotiation strategies people use, the role of trust, power imbalances between individuals or groups.
And these layers feedback on each other.
Constantly. Your internal biases obviously affect how you negotiate, interpersonal. But the outcome of that negotiation can then increase or decrease your internal cognitive dissonance, internal, which might then feedback and subtly shift your underlying personal preference over time. It's all interconnected.
Okay, what else?
Then you zoom out further to the societal cultural context. This layer includes the broader cultural norms about conflict and compromise, historical precedents in that society, prevailing ethical frameworks, the influence of leadership, and those powerful us versus them dynamics.
And finally, the environment.
Right. The outermost layer incorporates external environmental factors, things like real-world resource constraints, the interdependence within ecosystems we talked about, and overarching sustainability goals that societies might be trying to achieve. And crucially, crisscrossing all these layers are feedback loops. Outcomes at one level constantly influence attitudes and behaviors at other levels, creating this incredibly complex, dynamic, interdisciplinary system.
It really paints a picture of just how intricate compromise is. It's not simple at all. So, looking ahead, what are the potential future paths for AI getting involved in compromise? Both the positive possibilities and the dangers.
On the positive side, you could imagine AI helping us achieve unprecedented levels of stability and cooperation. Maybe helping resolve conflicts that seem utterly intractable now, global challenges like climate change, resource wars, even improving personal relationships by facilitating better understanding and negotiation.
That sounds amazing, but the perilous risks.
They are significant. The big fear is misuse by powerful actors, governments, corporations. Imagine AI being used for highly sophisticated manipulation of public opinion, subtly shaping preferences to align with certain interests.
Wow.
Exacerbating existing power imbalances, coercing people into compromises that aren't genuinely in their best interest, eroding authentic consent. It could lead to a really significant loss of human agency, with people being guided towards choices without even realizing it.
So AI could become either the ultimate mediator, helping us find common ground, or the ultimate manipulator. That's sobering. But it can also just help us think better, right? Enhance human strategic thinking.
Absolutely. That's a less dramatic but maybe more immediately useful application. AI can provide objective frameworks for decision-making. It can analyze huge data sets to help us evaluate options more clearly, identify potential risks we might overlook, understand the trade-offs involved, minimizing our own biases.
Like a superpowered advisor.
Kind of. It can also help align immediate decisions with long-term strategic goals, which humans aren't always great at. And it could facilitate consensus building within groups by clarifying the rationale behind different options, modeling consequences, and addressing concerns more systematically, empowering us to find better solutions ourselves.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive into the science of human compromising on a personal preference, it feels incredibly clear that this isn't just some minor aspect of how we interact.
Not at all.
It's critical. It's profoundly interdisciplinary.
It truly is. Compromise is woven into our biology, our cognition. It's absolutely essential for how complex societies function. And frankly, it seems paramount for tackling the massive challenges humanity faces.
And the AI perspective adds this whole other dimension, offering these sophisticated models, predictive tools, ways to see the connections we might miss, and maybe find new paths forward.
Yeah, its potential contribution is undeniable, for better or worse. What's really fascinating, and maybe a bit daunting to consider, is that the whole future trajectory of humanity seems to hinge, in a very real way, on our ability to get better at constructive compromise.
It's not just a nice-to-have skill anymore.
It feels more like a fundamental necessity. Our continued existence, our ability to flourish, it might really depend on mastering this.
So the final thought for you, listening. What does that look like for you? How can you take these insights we've explored about nurturing your own cognitive flexibility, seeking out ethical leadership that values compromise, approaching uncompromising behavior in others with a bit more understanding of the underlying identity issues, even thinking critically about AI's potential role. How can you apply all that in your own life, your own community, to help build a more balanced, prosperous, and sustainable future? Recognizing that this capacity for compromise isn't just desirable, it might be the most essential human skill we need right now.
This is DigitView.